Hello and welcome to the Nintendo Switch Online Game Club, the show where we play through the games available on Nintendo's various NSO apps completely at random. I'm your host, Derrick, and in this episode I'm joined by the Squire, YouTuber, and inquirer. How you doing, Ben?
I'm doing very well, Derrick. Thank you for having me. Yeah, no, this is my first time doing anything of this caliber within the community, and thank you for inviting me on.
Oh, of
I'm
course,
very delighted to be here.
Glad to have you here. And we're also joined by the returning Jenny Geist, back for more after she got to enjoy Yoshi on the NES. How you doing, Jenny?
I'm doing good, thank you. And yes, I'm glad to have another chance at this with a game that's longer than 20 minutes long, and a game I also quite like. So, I mean, I've binged through the entire Metroid series back in 2021, so I'm happy to give one of these another shot now that it's been a few years.
Absolutely. And as you're both likely aware, there are now over 200 games across the NSO, and while some are widely known like Super Mario Bros. And Zelda, there are some odd picks that could be hidden gems. We honestly don't know. So what we do is enter all those games into a randomizer, pick one, and then give our initial thoughts. And this week, the Wheel of Games has chosen, as Jenny indicated, Super Metroid for the Super Nintendo. You know, that hidden gem that nobody ever talks about and is never considered one of the best games of all time or best games on the Super Nintendo. Nobody ever talks about this game. It's whatever. Kind
of niche.
Yeah, kind of
Hell of an indie.
Yeah. It's very popular indie, I gotta say. It really is. I gotta ask though, is there any chance that any of us have no familiarity with Super Metroid? Have you both at least played it a little bit? Let's start with you, Jenny. What have you played of Super Metroid? Have you beaten it before? Or is this?
Yep. Because I beat it when I was when Metroid Dread was coming up. I went through I did the weird order where I did Zero Mission, and then I had already played Return of Samus, or the 3DS remake of Return of Samus. So I went from GBA to 3DS to SNES for Super Metroid. So due to that, I almost think Fusion is still my favorite of the 5 I played in a row back when Dread came out. But Super Metroid is probably the second, because, I mean, it's hard to deny just the quality of that world, how well it all holds up. And I'm actually really excited to revisit it, because there's something about revisiting a Metroidvania type game with like knowledge of the map that I haven't actually experienced with Metroid specifically yet. So I think it's going to work out really well, actually.
That's awesome. What about you, Ben?
It's a top 10 game for me.
Fair.
But
fair.
yeah, rewinding with my history with the Metroid series, like many people my age, stumbling upon Metroid for the first time through Smash Brothers Melee. My brother very much enjoyed Samus as a character. I skewed more towards Luigi, Mario, Marth, other characters like that. But I was like, "Yo, that Samus guy, he's really cool. I like how he looks." And my friends are like, "No, Samus is a girl." I'm like, "What? No, he isn't." And I get to that brawl cutscene, where it's the subspace. She comes in like through the ducts, and I'm like, "Zero Suit Samus." Oh, she's cute actually. No, but it is actually Brawl my first taste of Super Metroid, because they had those demos of the files. It's like, hey, you can play the opening cutscene, you can play through Brinstar, you can play through Norfair. I think once I got to high school, I definitely brushed up more on the Metroid library themselves. As of right now, I've played most, if not every Metroid game, finished them well. I consider it definitely among my favorite series, just under my pantheon of Sonic, Kingdom Hearts, Xenoblade, Pokemon, and what have you.
Nice. Yeah, I similar story. So my first Metroid game was actually Metroid 2 on the Game Boy, and I have no idea how I got it, because my games were completely chosen by my parents at that point. And I remember playing it a bunch, but I could never get past a certain point because I get lost. There's no map, so I just get lost. And I didn't even realize, because I wasn't even much of a reader back then. I didn't read I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I was just like, oh yeah, just go and hunt things. I didn't realize you opened up more stuff by killing Metroids. So I was just sort of wandering around and eventually trying to find my way, but I'd restart it constantly, just trying to see if maybe this time I'll find my way through. So it wasn't until later that I re-experienced the character through Smash 64. It's like, oh yeah, Samus. I remember that from that Metroid 2, Return of Samus. I'm familiar with that. And getting more of that. But by that point, I was away. I didn't have a Super Nintendo growing up, so I didn't experience Super Metroid until way later. And I think it was either through a friend or I forget exactly. I kind of want to say that I didn't experience Super Metroid until the Wii Virtual Console when I picked it up there. But I did play Zero Mission and Fusion before that and loved those because I distinctly remember that Zero Mission had come out around the same time that my school had a field trip to New York City, where it was just a day trip type thing for the school, and going into the Toys R Us in Times Square and finding it there and buying it and playing it on the trip home on the bus
Awesome.
from New York to home, and it was like, oh, this is amazing. I think I was mostly through it because it was just so much fun. So yeah, that's a good time, and yeah, I've since become just a massive fan of Metroid. And you can't go wrong with Super Metroid. Do I think it's the best in the series anymore? Not exactly, but it is really good. But yeah,
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I mean, I didn't even emphasize that earlier, but it probably is like a top 3, at least in my top 4 of Nintendo's franchises, like up with like Mario, Xenoblade, Zelda, and Metroid are like the 4 that like I will always love, because when I did play those 4 games back then, because I had touched Metroid a few times over the years, like through the Brawl demo on the SNES Classic, but that was the first time I had gone all the way through it. And even like ignoring like the historical context of how important it was just a solidly designed game. Like playing it back to back with the ones that had come out like 10 years later, wouldn't really tell for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Super Metroid is dear to a lot of people, and for good reason. Because it's one of those games that came out at a point where you had these developers from an old staff jumping from NES and I guess in Metroid's case from the Game Boy to the Super Nintendo, and really, really taking advantage of the hardware in play, really expanding on the scope of the series, the kind of multifaceted exploration, the challenge to different bosses, and it definitely is a defining title for a lot of people that shaped an entire genre, a search action genre, but later adopted the name Metroidvania because Symphony of the Night. Konami saw that. It's like, I want that. And
do you ever think it's weird that Metroid isn't a Metroidvania? Because to me, a Metroidvania is something that has RPG mechanics, and Metroid has no RPG mechanics.
It always throws me off because I think of it as a Metroidvania in retrospect, but it really like it doesn't have.
It's literally
like,
a search action. That's what it is. So
yeah.
that's the proper term.
Yeah, I think that's why Symphony of the Night, and especially Dawn of Souls. I played the first DS game last year,
okay.
but it was that in Symphony of the Night and also Aria, where I was like, there's something really special that it doesn't have. I can see the DNA, but it definitely takes a lot of liberties, and there are a lot of good hallmarks from series I like. It's like, numbers, that reminds me of Final Fantasy, the 9-9. I like that. But yeah, no, I'm very excited. I wasn't really itching to play Super Metroid recently, since I frequent it as well. It's of the Metroid games, I would say it's in my top 3 alongside Prime and Dread. And hey, Metroid Prime 4 might come out this year, so it's a good warm up.
Maybe. I have no idea on that one.
I would have said that like at the end of last year, but like at the beginning of this year, I don't even know anymore. Who knows anymore?
Every direct I anticipated Prime 4 to show up, Mario would always show up.
Yeah, Mario just taking Samus's lunch every time. That's all there is to it.
I mean, that is a good way of putting it, Derrick, because Metroid, even like before the big Switch boom that gave it that boost, Metroid was always a good, well-known series, but it's definitely among the B-listers of Nintendo's pantheon of classics. It's definitely up there, and the people who love that series are insanely passionate about it. But something like Xenoblade, as much as I love that series, it will sell very well, a good million or so, but it won't light the world on fire, say for the people within that community.
Yeah, I think it's like it's A tier in the sense that it's critically respected. Is one of the most critically respected
Yes.
of Nintendo's franchises, and
Yes.
perhaps outside of Mario and Zelda, probably the most influential because
Yeah.
I would say so. Yeah, if you're putting Pokemon in its own box, at least.
right, but
I mean,
influential because Pokemon. There's been other attempts at monster collection games, and some have been successful, but not to the degree of Pokemon. But
that is true.
the idea of Metroid and the search action genre and how much indies especially have just taken the concept and ran with it is quite impressive.
Yeah. Funny enough, I played Metroid, and then before I played Castlevania, I actually played Shantae, Pirate's Curse. So I actually got a bit of what a Metroidvania was, a little bit. But then, Simon Richter came out in Smash. I played Symphony of the Night. But that's apologies, getting off topic.
Oh, that's
but it definitely, yeah, no, it's as you said. Like Metroid is one of those series with that legacy. I mean, when Dread came out, took home a Game Award. It's a testament, I think, to how long people had been waiting. 19 years since Fusion, I believe.
And speaking of Dread, I think that's where Super Metroid probably ages the worst. The controls are going to feel weird. It's not going to feel as tight as you maybe remember it being or remember more modern Metroids being. Super Metroid, I remember going back to it a few times and being like, oh, this is really loose, or these jumps feel very odd, or the controls just don't feel as tight. It's fun, but it's definitely like you got to sort of work within it. So it'll be interesting to revisit those aspects.
Yeah.
As much
I noticed
as
that. Oh, sorry, you can go,
Jenny.
Squire.
Okay, sure.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Okay.
You're both too polite.
As much as yeah, of course. As much as I enjoy that game, I would say one of the biggest cons, and it's a kind of a gentle con the game has. I do not care for its default button mapping. That is one of those few games. Yeah, that is one of the few games that I will go into, and I'm like, I'm not shooting with this button or like running with this button. So what I do is how I play it is I have shooting on Y and then jumping on B, because that's a platformer mentality. And then I have dash on X, so when I'm dashing I can shoot but then also jump like back to back. But that's how I usually played it, and then I give item select to A. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, that's fair. What were you gonna say, Jenny?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, like, as much as like the level design has aged really well in Super Metroid, the one thing that I did notice playing it sandwiched between two GBA Metroid games is that it's like way floatier. Like, it doesn't feel as satisfying to move around because of that. It's sort of like how it sort of feels like the Brawl in terms of movement compared to the other Metroid games.
Like Samus's movement physics in Brawl or like Smash 4.
Yeah, I mean, especially because in Brawl she was so floaty already. So yeah, that's like the one thing that made it difficult to go back to, at least when I did it all those years back. But it was something I got used to, at least. It was an adjustment.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else you guys want to say for our preconceptions before we revisit Super Metroid?
I'm looking forward to taking time out of my schedule just to play a great, wonderful game. See if I can beat it in 3 hours. Probably will.
Nice.
But
I've never spedrun this. I have no desire.
I didn't speedrun it. I just know the game a good amount. Nice. I don't even know. I know some speedrun tactics, but I cannot sequence break to the best of my ability. But
JCM in the audience chat said it's like the second or third behind Mario 64 in speedrunning community. So it's definitely a game you can break, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. Oh, easily. There people know this game backwards and forwards. Like this is like the speedrunning game.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's what Sonic Adventure 2 is to me, for a lot of other people. Because SA2, I'm very aware of its age, but it's among my favorite games. And my favorite aspect of that game actually is going back and replaying those missions, because it gives you that incentive to really get a better hold of the game's control, physics, bit of the bullshit. But that's an aspect that I feel SA2 can share with Super Metroid, that I love seeing in both of those. So yeah, excited.
Very excited. Nice to have something good. So, I wonder how we're going to feel about this after coming back to it. We come back, it's like, oh God, what were we thinking? No, it's not going to happen. Let's be honest. But yeah, we're going to take a week to play some Super Metroid, and we'll see you all very soon to give our full thoughts on Super Metroid for the Super Nintendo. Till then.
Before Nintendo came out with Super Metroid, we wanted to make sure it was the most intense Metroid battle ever. So we thought we'd see how Killer here would fare against it. Ready, boys? That's 24 megs worth of weapons, worlds, and weirdos old Killer's up against. Nintendo's biggest game ever. He's a big boy. He can handle it. Well, let's see how he did. Ship it! Super Metroid, only on the Super NES.
And we're back after a week of playing Super Metroid for the Super Nintendo. Obviously a game that nobody ever talks about or even cares. I mean, it's like, why are we even bothering with this? Honestly, it's obviously just no. No. How did it feel coming back to it, Squire?
Well, it's Super Metroid. Very nice, brisk, and short for some. It's one of those games where it can be a bit of a homecoming if Metroid's a series you're familiar with. I know some might struggle more with the floaty aspect of getting back into the groove of it, but otherwise, it kind of felt like taking a nice jog. Once I touched back down on Zebes, I'm like, yeah, I could go through a nice run through Brinstar, pick up a Morph Ball Bomb or a Varia suit and what have you. Just felt nice to stretch the legs in a game I'm pretty familiar with.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Jenny?
I was really enjoying it, because now that I first played it when I was going through the Metroid series, I guess I went over this already in the intro, but going back to it now that I've played all the Metroid games, all the 2D ones at least, it honestly makes me appreciate Super Metroid more for how pretty much everything I like about the series was already established there. Like everything I love about Fusion, about even like Zero Mission and Dread, like it really does feel present in just how like brilliant the world design is, and even the movement, while it's very floaty and hard to go back to, I think the movement of Super has its own kind of charm and rhythm to it once you get used to it.
Yeah, I did notice that. I mentioned the floatiness before we got to it, and after playing it this week and beating it again, you get used to that floatiness pretty quick and get a sense of what exactly you need to do. The thing that caught me off guard a little bit more was I forgot how unwieldy it is to shift between missiles, super missiles, power bombs, grapple beam, scanner. It's like I want to quick cycle through this stuff, and you can't.
Like claw, like if you use like the claw for like moving, and like it like put another finger. Like it's not the most intuitive control scheme of the SNES, that's for sure.
It's a net positive when they transition to the Game Boy Advance with Fusion, where it's like, oh no, what are we going to do with all these buttons? Oh, let's just put one of our beams into a missile. If you morph ball, you can switch to a bomb, and there you go. And that kind of carried over when you look into future entry, Samus Returns, and Dread and what have you, with the utilization of the buttons they have. In the 3DS's case, the touchscreen, and just all around making that utilization feel more streamlined.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can definitely see, like, obviously Super Metroid is just always regarded as one of the best games of all times, but you do see the improvements that later 2D Metroids made, especially when it comes to Dread. And it's also one of those things where the map design I don't think is as intuitive as later games have proven they can be. There's a few moments where I found myself lost. And there's one moment in particular, I forget the exact area where it was. I want to say either Meridia or I'm blanking on the other one. Hot area.
Norfair.
Norfair. And I spent far too long trying to figure out where to go after I beat Ridley. So it was Norfair. And I'm using my scanner, checking the walls, trying to figure out where to go after doing this. Keep finding dead ends. I can't go back because there's acid. And like, where am I supposed to go? There's nothing showing me. I'm using all my tools. And turns out the scanner didn't show a false wall.
Yeah.
You just walk. And I didn't check that false wall because, well, I have the scanner. I'm not going to waste my time bombing.
What's strange is
to hate the scanner.
It's strange because
yeah.
I had the scanner and I was being a bit more attentive during my first run. I played 2 runs, of course, and the X-ray doesn't scan that wall.
No.
Very odd. It's a bit of an oversight.
I think it's the only one because usually it's pretty good. I mean, it'll even show you here what the next pickup you have. You see the Chozo statue and there's the ball and you can scan and see what it's going to be. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, I got stuck because it didn't convey. And I granted, I could have just walked left and tried things out. And eventually when I did that, I was like, oh, okay. But it was still like one of those odd moments. And there's a few other smaller moments, not as that didn't help me up as much, where I'm like, crap, where do I go again? Like I got turned around or I thought I had to go this way. And I just kind of got a little bit lost, not stuck, but just had to kind of repeat the map a bit. And I think that's where it just sort of, I mean, I think there's those moments in a lot of different Metroidvanias and search actions, but it stuck out to me because this one's always held up as one of the best. So when you see flaws like that, it's like, you got to point them out a little bit.
I would say, in terms of that cohesiveness with the maps, I would definitely say the quality is mostly maintained. When it starts becoming mostly, I would say, is around Meridia. It's interesting because, you beat the wreck ship, you get the gravity suit, and it makes going through the water very nice. But Meridia is a lot more... I don't want to know... I don't know if I want to use the word industrial, but it's like you're going back and forth, and it doesn't help. There's that area between Brinstar and Norfair that you have to bomb with the smart bomb, so you have that ease of access later on. So that is an aspect of Super Metroid that I think shows a bit of its age, and that's its map, its map UI, because it's like you get a feel for the rooms, and it might show you an item that you've gotten here or there, but sometimes you might need to do a bit of extra legwork. You might need to take a moment and say, okay, if I'm here, I need to get here. So this might be my best route. And speaking of Meridia, there was also this one moment, you were talking about getting stuck in Norfair. There was like a missile power-up, or I think it was a smart bomb. You have to fall down one of those quicksand pits. And I remember I got that, and I'm like, okay, how do I get out of here? And I'm looking around with the X-ray scope. I'm using the X-ray scope. That's how I'm like, okay, where am I going? And then it turns out the sand that I was like waiting in, turns out I had just go a little more right, and then I would sink down. I'm like,
I knew exactly what you're talking about, because again, it doesn't show it in the scanner, but if you walk just a little bit, but you can't move too fast or you'll walk over it and find yourself okay. It's an odd thing. Did you have any of those moments, Jenny, while you were playing, where you sort of found yourself a little lost?
For me, it's like whenever you get to one of those points where you get a new ability and you have to go back to where you previously saw a point where you can use it. That's where it always got me, because the map isn't very specific. So like I would see the points where I didn't go, and I would go back, and I don't have the best memory in terms of these things. So I would be like, oh wait, I need the grapple beam for this, and I only have the I just got the various suit, so I have to go to this location actually where it's hot, and then I can go in there. So a lot of moments like that where it's just the minor quality of life thing, where like if the map was slightly more detailed, or if you could, or like all modern Metroidvanias have, where you could like pin on the map where you need to go. Those are ones that got me. And also there was like something I noticed about Super Metroid is it'll have a lot of times where it kind of traps you in like a little loop until you get an ability and use it to get out. And a lot of the time, I think it's good it does that, because it'd be very easy to miss things. But there's a lot of times where I get in there and I'm like, what am I supposed to do? Until like the wall jump, I forgot the animals teaching you it aspect, and then once I remembered that, I had to figure out the wall jump timing, which is like impossible. So
That's
Yeah,
rough.
I think I know what you're talking about. There's an area in Brinstar or Upper Norfair. This is after you beat Crocomire, and you can actually miss the grapple beam. Or no, not the grapple beam, or power bomb, the first power bomb. Depending on how you play the game, of course. So you're making your way down to get the grapple beam, and then it's like, okay, I got the speed booster, I got to get running. But in order to make enough room, I need to get the power bomb, and I forgot where it was. So then
Mm.
I'm glad I know the wall jump. So I got out of there slowly but surely, but that did cost me a few minutes or so. But still great game.
Yeah, I mean,
oh yeah,
as Felix mentions, it's a game from 1994. It's 20 years old, and when you compare it to the first two Metroid games, the fact that we have a map at all is a huge improvement.
Oh,
It might not be the most exact map that shows you what goes where. It's just sort of a block and sort of a general idea of how it goes, but you can figure it out if you just have to do a little bit of extra legwork. But it's still nice to have. But it's the controls that I also found myself like. It's not just the floatiness of the jump, but it's the difficulty of the wall jump. It's the I don't know, just a general like activating certain things, like even just doing the space jump. I found myself having trouble with at times where it's just like I got it, and all of a sudden it's gone, and now I'm just falling. Okay.
I do think a bit a part of that with the space jump in particular, because I've had moments of that too, where it's like, it's nice just floating around as a buzzsaw, but then I'm like, not moving as fast with the dash. I mean, I can carry my momentum and what have you, but that's something when you get to later games they fine tune, because Samus has a lot more of a tighter jump in the later entries. And I do think there's some more environmental hiccups with some of the more age aspects. I'm specifically thinking about that area east of Brinstar. It's like these giant. It's like a mix of those like big bulbous flowers that look like Vileplume in a Sarlacc pit from Star Wars. With those claws. And it's like you get stuck in that, and you're stuck in it for like a good six. You're stuck in it for a good 6 seconds. And then it's like, okay, I got out, but then I got knocked back in, and now I'm stuck again.
especially how they reach out and grab you if you're doing the grapple beam. You have the grapple beam out. I don't want to like complain too much, but there are a lot of enemies in this game where it's like they're just kind of annoying. Like they're not hard. You can like be patient and deal with them, but it just makes them annoying when you're going backtracking and it's like, oh, it's this guy again. I guess I'll slow down and I'll ice beam them from far away so they don't like inconvenience my day. It's one of those things I think isn't as much of an issue in like Dread, because you just have such a like fluid moveset where you can honestly just avoid enemies like that if you want to.
You just reminded me that Super Metroid is the only game in this series, to my knowledge, where you can actually disable some of your power-ups. Because later on you can get the plasma beam, and I do think if you take out the ice beam with that, you can kill them quicker, because there'll be that split second where they like freeze for a sec, and then then you shoot another one at their way and they break. So there are small benefits to unequipping that. One of them actually comes in my least favorite boss in the game, which is Fantoon. I still hate that guy.
Oh god.
Yeah.
And I think Jenny, you were going on about pressing pause on the wrecked ship, and I'm like, I think I might know why.
I did manage to beat Fantoon. It's afterward, because Fantoon's another one of the ones where like there's a hidden wall that either it didn't show in the either it didn't show in the map or it didn't show in the like the scope, so I didn't know to go there. So I eventually remembered it, but that was around where I stopped. I just ran out of time. I wanted to finish it because I've been busy editing, so
That's fair.
It's strange because the bosses in this game, it's a nice bit of column A and a bit of column B in terms of how much fun you can have with them, because I think Ridley's a fun fight for what it is for a 94 game, and I like Kraid because, a testament to like the replayability of this game. You can like beat Kraid in like 10 seconds flat. If you know how to like manipulate his eyes and what have you. Dragon, still one of my favorite like exploits to kill a boss really quick. Because you're floating it and it shoots that like spider web sticky stuff. And then it gets Samus, but it's gonna like go against the wall. But you notice that there's this little electrical feel, and you're like, what if I tackle that? You grapple that electric fence or field, and you can kill it like with it attached to you. Granted, it'll still hurt you, but it's just fun to kill something that quickly like that.
No, I use that technique. Like you kind of have to. Once you know, it's like, well, I gotta kill him this way.
Mm-hmm.
I know I've been a little on the negative side up to this point, but make no mistake, this is a brilliant game. And one of the things that really stood out to me this time around is just sort of putting my mind in the mindset of somebody playing this for the first time back in '94, where even if you played the original Metroid, it plays with expectations so many times and it's amazing. And even if you haven't, you still can get a few of those aspects, but like there's so many great ways they play with the player's expectations and have little bits of storytelling there where, you have that first bit where you encounter Ridley and he kidnaps the baby Metroid and all of a sudden there's an escape sequence right away, or you're coming up to fight Kraid and here's mini Kraid, which was the size of Kraid in the original Metroid. So you think that's all he is, but then all of a sudden here's huge Kraid and that throws you off.
Crocomire.
Yeah, Crocomire coming out. That last little jump scare or the way he dies.
Oh, I love that when he shows up again. You think there's gonna be a phase 2, and he just dies.
Yeah, just all of a sudden he's a skeleton. The clone Metroids that aren't as strong that die quickly is like, what's going on with this? And of course, all this encounters with when you finally meet the baby Super Metroid, and it's throwing you off there. Like it's environmental storytelling is almost second to none in those ways where you can really get those. Like it is really impressive how they convey all these surprises more to the player than to Samus. Just like you think you expect this, but here's this instead.
Yeah, that really sets the tone as early as past the prologue. Which, by the way, the very first line you hear, "The last Metro in captivity, Galaxy of Peace." Still very impressed they voice coded that in there, because that's like the only other voice related thing in an SNES game that I can think about, other than one snippet at the end of Earthbound in its credits. Smiles and Tears.
I think there's another one I can think of. But
it sounds familiar.
I think I saw one on the NSO as well that had a bit of voice line that threw me for a loop. There's like, oh, it's in there. But I also know one that we never got in the States. Tales of Fantasia has way more voice lines than you would think for the SNES.
Oh, yeah. Question: Was Bubsy on the SNES? Because that might count too.
Yes, but I don't know if he talked. I can't remember.
I've never played. He might say. Well, I think he might say what could possibly go wrong after he dies, or what have you. But speaking of wanting stuff to die, you get to the space station. The environmental storytelling is very jarring because there are dead bodies on the ground. They're like dead researchers. It's very quiet. And you're like, oh, you see the baby. And then you just see Ridley's eye, boop, and then, lets out, and then you fight Ridley, and then you go off. One of the eerier moments in that game is actually one of the earlier fights in Brinstar. You fight this giant plant thing. And it's not the most intimidating looking thing. It's just Audrey 2 from Little Shop, but, it's a mean green mother brain from outer space. Let's go with that. But the music is very eerie, and that is something I need to touch on. The music by Minako Hamano and Sakamoto. No, not Sakamoto. Kenji Yamamoto, but not the Dragon Ball Yamamoto. This is another Yamamoto, the non-plagiarizing Yamamoto. Still, Super Metroid still has some of the most iconic themes. Not just in its series, but I would say in a Nintendo game. I think there's a reason why a lot of the music that's represented in Smash still sticks out to me to this day. And I really have to give props to those two when it comes to creating an environmental soundtrack.
I think it is one of my favorite Nintendo scores, or at least like of the Metroid series, it's easily my favorite because just this the way it uses the sound font to make these really just haunting sounds at some time, like Brinstar, like Lower Brinstar, like even Norfair, like all of them just have a very distinct tone where whenever I do hear them, I just feel right set into the mood of this area.
It's after you get out of Brinstar. It's the same track that plays uh, as Torvis Bog in Prime 2 when you're underwater. One of my absolute favorite pieces in the entire series, because not only does it nail that atmosphere, but it is also catchy. You know, it knows how to the song knows how to ebb and flow itself in and sort of like reach. You know, because music can leave quite an impression on you in that regard.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, the game still looks good. I mean, that's the thing, aesthetics wise, whether it's music, graphics, design, it all kills. Like it is just on point. There's a reason this was held up as one of the best games of all time for so long. And it's wild to me that we've, at least in my opinion, surpassed it with Dread. You just wouldn't expect that. Where you're always like, well, maybe Super Metroid still holds up, and it absolutely still holds up, but it doesn't quite have all the quality of life and aspects to it. And there's still aspects of Super Metroid that do better than Dread, but I mean, it's one of those things where you come back to it and you just envelop yourself in this, and there's quirks here and there, but it's just such a good time. It is a breezy, like I got stuck a few times. I still beat it within 5 hours. Like it is not a game that takes you too long. And I only found 67% of the items. Like there's so much more you could do. Like I distinctly remember a friend showing me Super Metroid for the first time, and he was doing all the speedrunning stuff because he wanted to show off, if you beat it super quick and you get to see Samus in a bikini, which, you know, ultimate reward, I guess.
90s was
I've never
something
beaten a
else,
Metroid game fast enough.
No, I haven't either.
I was tempted to try to do it this time, but I don't have
I remember
the memorization of the game quite down.
I remember recording that as a teenager. It's like, oh, I did it! Look what I did! And then I'm looking back in that, I'm like, I don't know if my friends in high school would care to see this if I posted it on social media, because context might look a little, no, I think that is one of its strengths. I do prefer to Super over Dread. Is while I love Dread and its environmental, how it utilizes its environments in 2.5D, I do think an aspect of Super Metroid I like. Also in its control too, but. One aspect that I like about it is how quick I can get it behind my head and I know it. Granted, Dread is still a fresh game. You know, it's going to be 3 years old at the end of this year. But I do think it is on the meatier end in terms of your standard Metroid adventures, which I would say average out to, I want to say 8 hours, usually your first time. But with Dread, to unlock some of those bonuses, you gotta like really keep in mind, like commit to memory how much you know about that game, and like the quickest you have to be is like 4 hours or something. And it's like, I love this game, and it's like, can I really do all this in 4 hours with how dense every environment is? And like, this is like after a bunch of Metroidvanias and a bunch of other indies like started to expand on like their own maps. So when I got to Dread for my first time with not many of those indies in my belt, I'm like, why isn't everything cubical? I don't know what's going on. Everything's round and large. It's overwhelming in that regard. So that's an aspect of Super Metroid I prefer, where it's a little more condensed. But when you know where things are, you know where things are. You know, with Dread, I love that game. I love its control. I love its combat and bosses and its exploration. Might not be as much sequence breaking in that compared to Super, but you know. It is very fulfilling to complete, but it's not one I would prefer to speed through.
That's fair. That's fair. I find.
I haven't.
Oh, good, Jay. I don't want to. I don't mean to.
Oh yeah, like I have on my notes. I think the one thing about Dread that puts it slightly below, maybe not Super, but it puts it below like the GBA games for me, like Fusion, is that I don't think the world of Dread is quite as interesting. Like it's not quite as much of a character in of itself
That's
as
fair.
Zebes or
I
like
can
the
see
space
that.
station in Fusion. And I think like playing Super Metroid, I kind of get why, because there is that environmental storytelling we touched on. There's the music making each area feel very distinct, but also the visuals, like we were saying. Like the sprite work in this game is very good, and the way that they have these very detailed environments that you can kind of fill in with your imagination, like beyond the 16-bit graphics, like it does have that very cinematic feel, as if you can imagine this being done in movie form. I mean, like
Yeah.
Derrick would.
Hmm.
I mean, I
Yeah.
might have a little bit of experience with that.
Yeah.
No, I mean, the enemies definitely feel like they have a bit more teeth to them here, where they feel more like, again, characters with this, because again, something I never noticed before is that you come across some enemies right before you meet the Super Metroid as you're going through the final area. All this stuff is turning into dust and whatnot, but here's two enemies that even fully powered, I can't really hurt that well. But then all of a sudden, here comes the Super Metroid, just sucks the life out of him. It's like, oh god.
And then
I was like, okay, that thing's
then it's-
super strong.
and then it's a very nice, cute detail. Going back to that storytelling aspect of it, where baby recognizes you. It
Mhm.
almost kills you,
Aw.
leaves you with 1 point, and then it's like, wait, is that you, Mom?
I recognize this. I've lost my madness
Yeah.
enough that I can see what's going on, because it's obviously just sucking up everything that it can. I guess a little bit to the super versus Dread discussion, just to end off. I think controls is what it puts Dread ahead of it so much for me, because it is so butter in that game. And one of the key
Oh,
things about that is that you could play the entire game and not get hit by anything. And that's, in fact, that's the entire challenge of Dread mode, which I have completed, and it's a lot of fun. Oh yeah, I did Dread mode once.
Wow.
And beat the whole game without having to, well, not having to take a hit, because you die instantly to anything.
Damn.
And
Wow.
it is fun to do that. Like, it's tough. There's no reward for it whatsoever. It's just personal satisfaction, and it'll take you a while. But when you get that down and get those movements down, you can totally do that. And I compare that to Super Metroid, and
Oh.
I'm sorry, I'm taking things all the time. I'm not dodging everything that Ridley's throwing at me. I'm just
Same.
it's war of attritions all the way around.
Yeah.
I'm never really I'm definitely someone who tanks things in. And honestly, if you get most of the health upgrades that you find, it doesn't even really matter that much if you tank things. So that is something I do like more about Dread. In fact, I think the bosses are my favorite part about Dread, because like that final boss took me like 2 hours to finish, and it felt so satisfied when I was done.
Yeah.
That final boss is why I'm afraid to speed through it, because I need everything I can get, because I know what awaits me.
I mean, I beat it in Dread mode, and all those health pickups have been basically nothing. So you can learn its patterns and whatnot, but
And I tip my hat to you in that regard.
but yeah, the excuse me, but
Bless
just having again, playing with expectations with Mother Brain, and the Mother Brain fight has been discussed to death. I don't really think I have anything to add to it, because it has been article after article after article about how, the sacrifice of the baby Metroid, the fight with the Mother Brain, especially comparing it to the original. Again, it's just really, you don't see that too often, where it's like, oh, okay, we're going to do essentially the first game, but make it better, but also have winks towards that first game to, have those, little extra, make really show how things have changed. And I just saw Dead Alpha Lion. Did you rescue the animals? Yes. It
Yes.
almost killed me because I struggled with the controls a few times. I literally entered the ship with 2 seconds left. I was
Oh my God.
sweating.
Listen to me. You can be speedrunner all you want, and that's fine. I respect that community. If you kill the animals,
It's non-canon.
who are you? It's not. It doesn't count. Do it again. But yeah, that was weird how you described the ending, though, because I don't know. That sounded a lot more like the beginning to another Metroid game I played. Samus spoke very monotone in that one.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
a bit more high fidelity. I can't. It's not coming to me right now. But that ending sounded a bit more like the beginning to something more controversial.
Mother of God.
Some other.
I think you mean I think you mean the baby of God. Whatever.
Whatever.
Other of him.
Yeah.
Ugh.
But I mean, that's why a remake of Super Metroid done by in the Dread style would be very fascinating, because a lot of people are like, no, it's untouchable. It's like, no, give Dread gameplay with the art style of Super Metroid. Yes, please.
I can.
I think if. Mhm.
Oh, sorry.
You go,
I
Squire.
can see like the nuance of like whether you remake that or not touch it, because I think Super Metroid kind of fits in a category similar to Resident Evil 4, where it's like there's so much right about this game. What could you gain from remaking it? Like, even though you re-release it like so many times, and then you look at the remake of Resident Evil 4, I'm like, oh my god, this is great. Like, they kept all the great aspects of it, fine-tuned a few aspects here and there, and kind of changed stuff for the better. And I can see Super Metroid working in that regard, because I will admit, I'm one of those few who would be a lot more cautious of a Super Metroid remake, because I know how dear that game is to a lot of, they're diehard purists to that game.
Mhm.
And, like, you look back before Samus Returns was remade, and Mercury Steam was going to work on Fusion initially. Like, they wanted to do Fusion, and it's like, Sakamoto was like, I don't know about that. What about 2? And it's like, we could do 2. And then from there, they got the ball rolling. It's like, so I got this game that I was working on in the DS. Didn't quite make a lot of levity. It's been about 19 years since the last one. Well, how do you guys feel about making the next mainline one? And they're like, what do we think? What do we think?
Yeah. I've been a fan of
Yeah.
Mercury Steam ever since I played Castlevania, the 3D remake, not the remake. But I'm blanking on it. Lords of
I
Shadow.
know what you're
Lords
talking
of Shadow.
Yes, there it is. Yeah.
Apologize. I don't know why I blanked on that, but I'm an Lords of Shadow apologist when it comes to Castlevania, and Mercury Steam is definitely pretty ace when it comes to that if given the right direction. But I think that's the key thing here, is that Super Metroid is that influential. I think this is the game all those indies look at and how to try to emulate and improve upon, and just, it's the building blocks. When they say Metroidvania, this is the Metroid they're talking about. And yeah, I'm not sure how much more I can add to a Super Metroid discussion, because it is a classic. There are absolutely things to nitpick, but they fall by the wayside because it's still just fun at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, if you do decide to go down that path of like, how can I really optimize my routes? Like, when you like really look into, okay, how can I mock ball? How can I shine spark diagonally? You feel like you're doing some Dragon Ball Z maneuvers. It's because it's like there's that last stretch, where you're going up. It's like the old escape route at the end of the first Metroid. I just shine spark diagonally. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm already at the top. Okay, let's go.
Ooh.
I did not do that.
Yeah. Funny enough, terminal montage is something about Super Metroid actually helped, where it's like, okay, what if I did this here? I'm like, oh wow, I'm glad I looked into that. Yeah, so they're like small things like that. Other YouTubers I watch too. Shout outs to Johnny, a big fan. Really have gotten like a lot of interesting details and things that might not have like been initially discovered in the first place, because I remember it wasn't until John's video where there's that very obscure technique where it's like you do like a smart bomb morph thing, and then Samus, she like kind of crystallizes in like this weird pod, like I don't know how to describe it, but it's like it heals you a little bit. It's weird circumstances to activate it.
Yeah,
but
it's some sort of healing technique. I've never done it in my life. I've never felt the need to, but it's certainly an odd thing.
There are auto tanks, and like I miss about half of them usually on my first run. But yeah, no, like this game is brimming with detail. They really know how to bring the world to life with the new technology they're given. I think I mentioned that a little bit last week, but it's as you said, Derrick, just how they were able to capture the world in both its environmental storytelling and really do those winks and nods to subvert expectations with crate size, the baby, and a bunch of other things too with that. To this day, though, one sprite detail, I still don't know why Samus's suit has like that little throb effect. You know what I mean? Like if you just sit still, Samus's suit starts to pulse. I never understood that.
Huh? I never thought about that.
I don't sit
It makes
still
more
too
sense
often, so
yeah, it makes more sense in Fusion, given what happens to the various suit in Fusion. But that's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah.
But this was a wonderful time. Always nice to come back to this.
Oh yeah.
I
Any other?
agree. I had a really fun time.
I'm glad. Yeah, I mean, I knew we were in for a good time when we got this, but to make it official, I believe at this point we've said all we wanted to say about Super Metroid. But what's our final verdict? Would you recommend it as an NSO or tell people to stay away with an NO no? Jenny, let's start with you.
NSO, like decidedly, it's probably one of the best games on NSO overall.
And what about you, Squire?
If it was Monday the 1st, my answer would have been different, but then I would have given you an April Fool's. It is NSO. Absolutely. Yeah, this is a hallmark. I would say it's quintessential in terms of Super Nintendo games, you know, like up there with Mario World, Final Fantasy VI, a few other gems among that. Play it, please. I insist.
Agreed. NSO all around. I love this game. It ignited it in Symphony of the Night, ironically enough, is what ignited my passion for the Metroidvania genre and search actions, and always love to see what they can offer up. But going to a Metroid always feels special because they're not always common, but it's nice when you get to play one, and going back to them reminds you of what makes them so much fun. But what about all of you? Have you somehow not played Super Metroid before, and was this your first time? And let us know. But before we go, where can everyone find you at? Squire, plug away.
Of course. Well, you can find me at YouTube. My YouTube channel name is Squire with an underscore. Without an underscore was taken, couldn't tell you why, given the population of the world and what have you. But there I have my own review series titled Squire Inquires. Has a nice ring to it, if I do say so myself. My most recent video was Sonic Unleashed. I enjoy that game for a lot of reasons, but I also have my criticisms with it. If that interests you, maybe you should check out, give it a like, a comment, a subscribe. I find the feedback to be very helpful. And stay tuned, because I am working on a Paper Mario video that should be out by the end of the spring, hopefully. And of course, Pondering Games, I take a piece of news and relate to my own personal experiences, what I think about it. Of course, I do other discussions too. I've had Jenny, Brandon, and another good friend of mine, Nutty, on, and we talked about the future of Nintendo this year and beyond. So some of that stuff interests you, please go take a look. I also have a Twitch, bit inactive right now, but yes, that is Squire with an underscore.
Absolutely. Check it out. What about you, Jenny?
All right, I'm on YouTube at Jenny Geist, or Jenny Geist Vids if you want to look it up, like on the URL. I'm on Twitter at Jenny Geist _, Patreon at Jenny Geist. I admittedly don't use Twitter as much anymore, but I still do from time to time. And yeah, I'm probably gonna have a video out on Saturday too, if you guys want to check that out. But yeah, I'm thank you for having me on as well, and I was glad to have Squire on too. Like, I'm glad we got something better than Yoshi this time. It really worked out.
Yeah, it absolutely did. And yeah, thank you both for joining me. And if all of you joining us enjoyed this episode, let us know in the comments, and please consider supporting us at patreon.com/gvgaming, which includes our live audience tier that will allow you to watch Game Club live as it's being recorded. And there we go. But now it's time for the Wheel of Games to choose next week's title, as I'm joined by my special guests, Sabrina and Rebecca Stone. Are you both ready to see what game we're playing?
Heck yeah.
Yes, I'm very excited.
Oh boy, this is always a little nerve-wracking to see what we're going to get, but let's bring up that wheel. Give it a spin.
Oh, always something obscure for me, so get ready.
Yeah, can you escape the obscurity? And this time, you are going to be playing The Adventures of Lolo on the NES.
The only thing I know about this is that it's from the Adventures of Lola 1 and 2, the song, the We Shop Wednesday song.
Oh, really? Oh, I have thoughts. I have thoughts on this, but we'll get into that next time.
Sounds familiar.
You guys, I guarantee you guys are at least somewhat familiar with this. There's in one way, but we'll get into that next time because there you have it. We'll see you next time as we cover the Adventures of Lolo for the NES. Thanks for watching, and until next time, bye.